Welcome everyone to episode 2 of the Pathmakers podcast. I'm very grateful to have with us today Jasper Cuppaidge, who is the founder of Camden Town Brewery. Thank you so much for coming, Jasper.
Luca, a pleasure. It's nice to be nice to be talking again.
Yeah,
it's been some time.
So for people that don't know, I had the pleasure of working with Jasper for just about 2 years.
Yeah.
So I was the MD of Camden in the 2017, 2018 timeline. And so we've got to know each other well and obviously stayed in touch over the last 7 years since then.
Indeed.
And so there's a bit of a special tinge to this one because I don't think I've told you this, but when I was thinking about doing this podcast, I was like, well, you know me well enough. You know, me hosting a podcast isn't like a natural thing for me. Before I left Northern Monk, I don't think anyone actually knew who I was, and I was pretty happy with that. And I was thinking about doing this, and I was like, you know what? This will be the decider. I'll send Jasper a message to see if he'll do the podcast. If he says yes, I'll do it. If he says no, I'm not going to do the podcast. And the reason I did that, you would think, oh, you know, Jasper, he'd do it. But I know you hate public speaking.
Of
right?
course. And I think I answered pretty quickly, right?
That's
but I
the
definitely.
thing. Not only did you say yes, you were like, but yeah, 100%. Let's do it.
Because listen, it'd be wrong to say it would be. We had a really good working relationship, right? I love those times of you and I together. It was a pretty intense period, right? We were launching a big brewery in the southeast, but I still enjoyed it, right? Coming into work to you. Yeah. Every day was fun.
I worked for you, man.
Yeah, well, we worked together, I would have hoped.
But the other, I do remember, it was not that long after I started, maybe like 6 months, but it was like the AB had invited us to go speak at their wholesaler conference or something like that. And you were like, oh, Luca, I hate these things. Like, I do not want to speak at. I mean, you are a good speaker, but you're telling me, and I'm like, oh, it's okay, Jasper. Like, well, I'll help you out. We'll figure it out. And so I'm like, where is it? Where is the talk? Like, Wembley Stadium.
I remember that well. I think Alan Shearer was on before me.
No, Del Piero.
Del Piero. Yeah, you were in all.
I don't forget that. Yeah. I got a picture with Del Piero that day. It was amazing. So, and then we went up and I think did the presentation together in the end. But yeah, so it meant a lot to me that you said yes, and quite frankly, it was the impetus to go ahead and do this.
Hopefully I won't let you down today. But yeah, no, like public speaking isn't a favorite, but I guess it's because it's kind of those things out of your control, right? I think it's I like to not control them, but to be able to work hard enough to know that I'm confident in doing it. And if you don't public speak all the time, it's definitely didn't come easy to me. But unless it was in front of the team, right? They became easier and easier. Those company presentations.
But when you do speak, everyone kind of tunes in. So and probably the case here as well.
Hopefully.
So before we get into it, one of the things that about the podcast is that it is a bit of a different style. We don't really go through your story. So in lieu of that, what I always try and start with is for those people that don't know the story as well, to try and give some resources they could go to because, they might listen to this and go, I actually want to know more about Jasper, about Camden Town. So I wrote a few things down here. If you have any to add, by all means. There's an article in the Times from February of 2019 called Founder of Camden Town Brewery is not about to exit after selling up AB InBev. And to be honest, obviously I have so much context to you and the story, and I thought that piece was actually quite a good one to bring out who you really are, without any kind of typical journalism gloss to it all, and the story. And then there was another interview that you did with Matt Curtis on
that was good
beer hunting, which was a good chat through some of the points of the Camden Town journey. There was also, I did a lot of research, there's also a lot of articles on Marmite beer. And
that was popular.
Anything I missed? Anything you would add?
No. There's plenty of copy out there, right? That was good and bad, but all of it obviously the same narrative that we were, what we were trying to do was just to improve things in the beer, in the beer world through the lenses of Camden. So I was never upset by anything that was written.
Cool.
So,
Well, hopefully this joins that list.
Yeah.
What we're going to start off with is trying to dig into like some of the decisions. So not so much the journey, but some of the decisions that actually shape that journey, right? So the first one is one that is, I guess, rather obvious, but if a good place to start is the idea of lager. Now, this was 2008-ish, right? I think where you were starting to
make beer in the basement of the Horseshoe.
You got it.
Yes.
Right? No, you weren't making. Was it lager at that time?
No,
it wasn't. Right?
No. So we were. We were making. Yeah, I was making ales in the basement because it was, obviously you needed a slightly more complex brewing system to be able to brew beers under pressure, once they're starting to carbonate, to hold on to that pressure. So I was building, making open fermented beer, ale styles in the basement, which I loved, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately what I was wanting to make was something that would sell a lot, and looking at what was going on upstairs, and no matter how much I toiled downstairs from 3 a.m. till, 10 o'clock before I'd get on the floor and make, got those beers got very popular, and I'd be brewing them probably 3 or 4 times a week. It was still being outstripped by, Mr. and Mrs. Heineken and Mr. and Mrs. Stella Artois. And not because it was commercial, but I also love lager.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I'd really like to make lager. And I couldn't understand why no one else was making it. You could make ale everywhere in the UK, but no one was really thinking about it. Was made by all the big, bad conglomerate beers, but no one was looking at it. And I was like,
that's interesting, right? Because at that time, a lot of people, I think that the standard story is person went to the US, had these hoppy beers, was like, oh shit, this is amazing. We don't have this back home. Or but that's not you. You were like, I'm going to make lager. Why is your story different? Why did that happen?
Because I think we actually did have those beers here. If you drink, say, Adnam's Broadside, or Fuller's London Pride, all the, I'm just saying because they were readily available. They were beautiful and rich and hoppy and delicious, right? But when it came to lager, I didn't think we had anything that, when I went to, say, Europe, mainly Germany, drinking beers from say Tegensee as an example, as a local brewer, the beers were just beautiful, delicious, delicate, light, and and refreshing, and and I enjoyed drinking them. And there was no one. You could only buy, like I said, you could buy big beers. Not to say they were bad, but they were big beers and reasonably boring, right? And so that was, I guess, and then looked at that as an opportunity. We're thinking, well, why don't we do that? And there was a big barrier to market. Oh, you can't do that. You can't make lager. You need this incredible, crazy, really expensive equipment to do that. And I was like, well, that was like a red rag to a bull.
Yeah. So there was an element of that's what you wanted to drink, that's what you wanted to make. And there was an element, you said, of you just saw at the Horseshoe that's what people were drinking, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what everyone was talking about at that point. No one was really talking about hops, and no one was really talking about cask, or there was real ale, obviously, as a movement, but it was like that collection of people who were really engaged with beer in a wonderful way. But then everyone drank lager, and they'd talk about, and it wasn't very inspiring. They'd talk about a pint of Stella Artois or a pint of Peroni, I think was the beer of the moment, right? Yeah. And I just thought that there's, when, say, we've used this before, right? When Tyrrell's were making salt and vinegar crisps, because Walker's biggest crisps was salt and vinegar, and they came out and made it, I guess more distinct, but still salt and vinegar crisps. And it just sort of made real sense, to go and do something that everyone wanted to do, or what everyone wanted to enjoy. Why can't I make them for them?
It's interesting because the start of a lot of the craft beer story is around personal discovery, people being I tried this and it was well, I want to make this. I want to make this hoppy beer. And of course you had that with lager, but what you hear in your story is this idea of looking at what the consumers were doing, right? So there was, of course, the element of what you wanted, but you were already very much in tune with what is going on upstairs. What are people talking about? It's about the consumer. It's about creating something for them. And I think that permeates through a lot of the Camden story, right? So is it fair to say you're someone, I don't even know if you would go about describing it this way, but I know you well enough to know you are incredibly in tune with the consumer and thinking about what the consumer wants and thinking about how to deliver that. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we created a beer company that was built on a service standard model, right? It was like a restaurant, not what does everyone want, so I'll give it to them. We were disciplined, I think more disciplined than most breweries, because we were really singular and we only made lager, right? And we made, a few other beers, but the real focus was Hell's. Yeah. So it was a bit like, if you go to say Flatiron, they only make a steak and they make it really well. They don't only make a steak, they make a very good steak and they make it, and that's what they focus on. I think that's what we were, exactly the same model for us. We're going to make lager, we're going to make it the best in the world, and we're going to focus on every single element of how that touches, be that glassware, delivery, invoicing, quality, everything about it, around it was important, because we wanted every consumer, because if we were going to get the lips away from another big brand, we had to be better than them at every single element of it, and that's where we went after it.
And your background was hospitality at the time.
Yeah, which I stumbled upon, right? I didn't do so well at school. That's the kind of the story, right? No so well at school, fell into an industry that I didn't follow. Started a job in the industry, kind of tried and tested bar jobs, waitering, loved it. Opened a restaurant or a pub, loved that. And I guess it was a bit like specializing, right? So I went from trying into hospitality, into restaurants, into pub, into brewing, making beer, opening a brewery. So I guess it was like specializing in an industry that I really, really loved. And I guess that's where I ended up, was a specialist in one element of the hospitality industry, which was a beer company.
Do you see, I mean, you kind of did say this already, but like, do you see Camden as a hospitality company then?
I think the atmosphere in it was, I think everyone from brewer to forklift driver had an element of service, you know, from keeping the, you know, in the sense of keeping the muse clean, or, you know.
I did write that down because I was obviously thinking about a lot of like stories, and like, it was great. I mean, for me, it was amazing because like, I obviously came from Big Beer at that time. This was my first job in, I mean, I know at the time had just been purchased by InBev, but like at that time, operationally, we were very autonomous, right? Yeah. It was very, and I remember like, you know, it was such an indoctrination to me because it was like coming from these big companies where obviously it's a lot about the company and very little about the product, and definitely very little about hospitality. And you come in, it's like negotiating budgets with InBev, like $1 million budgets, and you're like, Luca, the muse is like fucking dirty. We gotta clean it. There's a can right there, and I'm just like.
But I think I learned that from everywhere I went to, be it brewery throughout Europe, or, you know, or even with like, say with, you know, say even like Sierra Nevada, you'd go there and it just would be immaculate from office to front door, or from office to, you know, to warehouse. It was always, and I think if you're going to make something so beautiful, everything around it had to be correct, right? Because if everything wasn't together, then things would start to slip. And I think that was one of the sort of attitudes I was and even we took that to you know, to Enfield, you know, making sure that, you know, from brewery floor to warehousing to the car park, everything was always kept in order. Because I think if no one's holding up the business, then everyone's got a right to let it slip. And if you're making something that's so important, a beer's important. You know, it's expensive. It's the end of a working day. So for me, it was that experience was really important. And if no one was on that journey with me about how important it was, be that within the roles of their job, then I felt that it could slip at the worst possible moment, which would be consumer drinking a beer that wasn't up to standard.
It's interesting because I don't think, no matter how much you want to look and read into Camden, I don't think anyone tells that story. Like I think the only people that know that are the people that were close to it, or, you know, obviously the customers that were close to it. And it speaks volumes that a lot of your earliest customers are, you know, still friends, and, you know, but there is an incredible story of quality and customer service. I think it all comes back, like I was thinking about this obviously, and how to kind of frame up some questions here. And it's like, Camden was all about customer service. Beer quality was incredibly important. You showed up, I mean, even years after selling the business, you would show up to, well, everything really, but you'd show up to the tastings. You know, we got Mark Dredge involved at those times as well. Like, beer quality was paramount. You came over to CBC when we won a few awards back in Nashville. But then, you know, like I remember going into the business and seeing someone sent me I think Zoe sent me the trade tools booklet. Booklet's probably the right word. It's like there's like 50 different things in there, right? Like it was exactly what you said. Like, you were acting like a big brewery, but you were doing things with care and with quality and making them better. And the tools were super. They elevated the experience of beer. They weren't just because someone was asking for something. Right? Yeah, everything was incredibly quality driven, and I don't think most people's perception of Camden, unless they were really close to it, is that. And I think that's a shame, because that's exactly what it was.
Well, I think actually it's quite good, because I think it was for outside, everyone thought it was really simple and basic what we were doing, you know. And I think that's why it worked so well, because you know, and that's why it wasn't polarizing or take your head off or doing this or too attitudinal. Okay. It was just like, we're going to turn up and we're going to be really good. Okay. Right. And I think, everyone it was like a nice blessing. I think we were always like it's a bit like, you know, music that you're not meant to like, you know, a bit like, say, you know, and Coldplay or Mumford & Sons, you know, those guilty pleasures, you know, I don't really want to like it, but actually it really does a great job. You know, it works and it tastes great and it operates in the realm it should do. I can have all my fun over here, but this thing is really functionally operational and successful. And I guess that's what it was. And those elements were, it's a bit like everyone holding their hands to make it all go together, and it did. It was hard work, right? Yeah. It was definitely taxing on me as much as it was on a lot of people, but it was worth it because, you know, like you said, you know, we won lots of awards. We won, you know, great awards for lager. We won a great, you know, I think if you ask people who were within the industry who knew about us or knew about beer and knew about what we did, I think they would be right. They had a lot of respect for us because of what we did.
Nice.
Yeah.
I do remember winning gold for Gentleman's Wit and beating Hugard in a category that they was created,
I do remember
basically
that.
created. It's a good segue because one of the things I did want to touch on is distribution, because it follows very much on the heels of that. Like, most breweries in London has the advantage of, obviously, well, disadvantages in some cases, but the advantage of having a lot nearby. So, direct distribution is something that everyone starts out with, obviously. In more further afield cities in the UK, that's difficult because you're more spread out, right? And then generally, as you grow, you get into wholesale and stuff, but like, you just didn't really get away from direct distribution. You were like, direct distribution is going to be our way forward. When I joined the business, I think we were about 65,000 hex at the time. I want to say 35 to 40,000 was direct distribution. Now, of course, it was through a third-party logistics provider. But there was like an incredible logistics engine to Camden. Why did you do that?
When I first started working in the Westbourne in West London, I had a really good relationship with dray drivers, who'd come and they used to deliver beer for all the brands. As in, they delivered their own brands, not like hundreds of brands. And I used to always have a conversation with them, get them a coffee or an orange juice. And I really enjoyed that conversational part with them. They'd come, and they'd have a leather apron on and they'd put the beer away and talk about what was happening at the brewery, or, this beer's coming on special. And they were part of the working week. I enjoyed that kind of interaction with them. And I just couldn't understand why, a bit like your corner store, you'd have a relationship with that person. It's a face to what's going on within the brand. And if that's healthy and it's good, that, well, it's probably honest and it works. And so I felt that was an element of, we'd make great beer, but we also just didn't want to put it on pallets and stick it high in people's warehouses that weren't, who didn't care for it. Because, I've seen, in the West End, when you'd have people like drop beer on people's corners 4 or 5 blocks away, and then you'd have this poor bartender who'd have to go and, try and roll it down, Brewer Street to try and get into there, on a Friday afternoon. I just like, that's just not service, and it's not the service we're going to offer. And if it limits us in the beginning until we can get it right, we'll grow at that, if that's a speed, if that's part of the speed that we grow up, well, that'll have to be it. And we'll just make delivery better until we can get bigger and bigger and bigger. Because I believed, and it worked, right? The direct distribution was a big key for our business, because it was. I mean, see people's beers who weren't on tap. Salesperson would get called by the truck driver. They'd be in there the next day getting new accounts, So there was a lot. It worked. We made it work, even though it was hard.
And then I guess, because obviously there is a cost and a complexity to doing that. But I guess going back to the quality thing, and I mean, ultimately, if you're trying to make the whole thing quality, there's a price to quality, there's a premiumness to it. So you just you made sure you did things the way that you felt was right, and then the business model had to work that way.
Exactly. But the model did work. I mean, how it was expensive, but then also we could, the price for our beer was coming to us and not going to a wholesaler. There was still costs in storing and moving and shipping and their margin, and and then also it just meant you could move fast as well. If you were working with someone and you needed to do something great, like on a Friday night, this place needs 20 kegs. Well, you know what? It happened. Yeah. It wasn't like, well, it's got to go through 3PL and the business says no and they'll get it next Friday. Well, hold on a minute.
There's a theme happening here about customer service and hospitality.
No, 100%.
Cool. Then the other thing, one other thing is this idea of scale. And again, you said it very close to the beginning about when you talked about lager and wanting to do something that was had this ability to scale. But I think a lot of times when people think about craft breweries. And when people start craft breweries, I don't think scale is necessarily part of their thinking. I think that it's maybe a product thing. It's trying to figure out again, maybe there's a style or something they were inspired by and they build it, and then it kind of almost snowballs from there. This becomes this, and then this becomes this. But that wasn't the case for you. Like, it was pretty determined early on. Scale was going to be a big part of this. Your ambition was to be big.
Yes. Yeah, definitely big. I'm not sure how big, but definitely bigger than, definitely not small. It was probably, because it was probably reasonably unsophisticated back then. It was probably a monetary term rather than a size of barrels or how many employees or awareness through a survey. But yeah, we always, being big was within what we were thinking back then. Being that size, well, we surpassed that size very quickly. But being big was definitely a household brand for London. I think is what we were ultimately, that's what I was setting out to be, because I didn't see any reason why we couldn't be. London was a wonderful market. The UK was a wonderful market, and I'd seen wonderful brands happen like that in the UK, and I didn't see any reason for us not to be, as long as we stuck to our, what we set out to do, to make it better, and, and focus on keeping things simple and be bold and don't take ourselves too seriously. I think as long as we stayed true to those, that was kind of the level of where it could get to, and it did. Yeah.
And ultimately, if you start with the ambition of that horseshoe conversation from the beginning, people are ordering this, you're delivering that ultimately meant scale, right? Because lager was big, right? So if you're going to get people to stop drinking as much Peroni or Heineken, you're not going to do that by being 5,000 hectares.
Yeah, I don't remember the numbers back then, but maybe it was like 80% of the world drank lager, and probably 70% of that's not really, that probably doesn't come from fantastic places, right?
79.9.
So I thought it was even at the time, I didn't realize how much of an open door it was to do something really well. But then there were so many brands, Innocent, or like I said before, Tyrrell's, who were doing that, making something really good, making better orange juice, and talking about it in a way that was resonating with people who were interesting. And the same with crisps. And lager, I couldn't believe it was kind of a sleeping giant. And I know, we set out to make lager, but it really became our North Star. It was like, right, we're going to make beer. Lager's going to be, the one that we really enjoy and drink a lot of, but we're going to have a pale ale, and we're going to have a stout, and we're going to have a wheat beer. But then very quickly, it was like, we're going to have the North Star of Camden is going to be Hell's. Yeah. It's all going to be about Hell's, and Hell's is going to be whatever it takes to make Hell's a household, quality-driven brand that's exciting and fun and bold. Then that's what it's going to be about. Yeah.
So with that all said, was Camden a craft brewery?
I think from an outsider looking in, of course it was. I think as in if you look from a commercial and, it was very good way to resonate with some of the commercial deals we were doing with, big distribution partners, be that Young's or, I can't remember or Fuller's pub groups, things like that. It was great for them to associate with us because they needed a craft offering. Inside the four walls of Camden, we didn't ever consider ourselves a craft brewery. Craft for me, as I think I've stood up and said this many times, it's a great word and it worked, but it didn't really encapsulate what we were about. Craft for me encapsulated small, and it's a great idea, and there was elements of it that we were detailed, and you'd care about end to end, be that how it's made, how it's presented, how it's taken to market, but it also had a connotation of not being very big, and I didn't really sit comfortably with that. So I think there was lots of things that we liked about it, but I never think we sat inside Camden and had pitched ourselves at four walls that we were a craft brewery. No, we were just a great brewery and trying to maintain, still stay great and get big at the same time.
I wasn't around for this, so you're gonna have to probably help me with this, but there was an idea of pulling together some breweries to create some kind of Brewers Alliance or Brewers...
That's right, the Craft Brewers Alliance.
Is that what it was?
It was.
Which was like the BA of the UK kind of thing.
Yeah,
and
I think it was like, who was it? I think it was Logan and Beavertown and maybe James and Brewdog and ourselves and then a couple of other London breweries. But I think we were kind of we had a bit of scale by that stage, and so we were leaned on to kind of lead it or be part of the conversations anyway.
And what, going back to this definition of craft and stuff like that, I think one of the things was, again, it was very hard to land on what a definition should be. In your opinion, what is the definition that should have existed for that kind of association?
I think independence became a really strong word within beer. I think that because even though, again, it struggles with other things, because independence doesn't mean you're good, but it just means there's a different way of thinking, that you're not going through some sort of corporate structure. Yeah. And I think that's what they've landed on now. There's independent indie breweries rather than craft breweries. And I think because you can say, well, I am or I'm not.
Yeah. You can't, though.
Yeah, well, you can't. Yeah, depending on how you qualify independent. Exactly.
Well, because here's the thing, right?
You're not on the stock market. Is that an independence?
But then what if a PE owns 50% of you? Are you independent?
No, well, exactly. No, I don't, and I think that's why we didn't adventure down the roles of trying to get it, because I didn't really, at the end of the day, I wanted to have friendships within the beer world. I did, and we had close ties, we collaborated with people, but ultimately I didn't really care. I wanted to just get on with making Camden the best possible brewery it could be, and did it. If someone wanted to call me a craft brewery, well, I'll be a craft brewery. If someone wanted to call me a lager brewery, I'll be the lager brewery. But all I really wanted was to go, well, they make really good beer and they're really good people to deal with, and that's more important than any sort of tagline.
And so if there had been a definition, would that have helped, or is this kind of a semantics?
No, I didn't. I mean, I don't think it helped because that's why no one's landed on it. And that's probably the quagmire that's sort of struggling with small breweries and big breweries now of like, where do they sit? Because they all kind of leaned in to trying to be, I don't see any other industries trying to do it. I don't see music industries trying to be craft music. I don't see, then I don't see the necessity for it. You just got to be good, big, small, owned by PE, listed on the stock market, whatever it is, you should just be the best at it, or the best you can be at it, and continually focus on being yourself and being good at that, and being bold, and just focusing on what your business is about, not being focused on being a craft brewer, because the structural financial structure of a business can be fantastic or can be terrible. It doesn't make you a good brewery or not a good brewery.
Yeah. Right? It's a really good way of looking at it, where a lot of this definition stuff ultimately is a very internal discussion, whereas like what you're saying is like, why don't we just focus on the consumer and get that right? And however, because I don't think consumers, other than, if you go to a Tesco's and it says craft shelf, like I don't think people really know or care much.
But it's a good way
categories.
for them to box everything together, and I get that, and that's why I said at the beginning, it worked well for our, for our commercial partners, for us to be that craft offering, because they needed to. Tick a box of what was available. And if we were in that box, then fantastic. If that's what you want us to be, then that's what we'll be. As long as we're operating in it and doing what, we're not limited by it. If it came and said, well, you've got to be craft and you have to do this, this, and this, I mean, well, I wouldn't be that.
Yeah.
We're going to be Camden, but if you want to call us that, then we're good with that.
That's cool. Let's take a little bit of a break. And what I want to do is, this is episode 2. In the first episode, I realized that I didn't, on purpose, because there's other things to tackle, I didn't actually introduce myself. So I might take a minute and try and do this super, super quickly. And you know me pretty well, so you can ask any questions if you think I've missed anything.
I've missed a gap there. I know I've got one already.
If I'm making myself sound too bad or getting So I started at InBev. I worked there for 10 years, started in Canada, moved on to the global office in New York, where I worked mostly on projects around the world, and then landed myself in Europe, working in Leuven in Belgium. Worked on all kinds of stuff from starting in the brewery to sales operations to trade marketing, things like that. And then I woke up one day and I didn't want to go into work anymore. It was really actually what happened. I had a bit of I just couldn't sleep that night. I walked in, I was like, something's wrong. I don't really. And I just went in and I decided to leave. So I handed my resignation and I went traveling. And then like 2 months into traveling, I got I can't remember if it was a phone call or an email
It was probably from Stuart, I think. Was it Stuart McFarlane who linked
I can't remember the actual, but somehow it was like, oh, Jasper wants to talk to you. And I guess Stuart McFarlane was the head of Europe of
wonderful
InBev.
man.
Yeah, great guy. And he, I guess you were looking at it for an MD, and he was like, oh, you should talk to this guy. He just left. I was actually in Australia at the time, I remember. And anyway, we got to talking, and so I remember going to do my interview with you. I interviewed with several people, including your father-in-law.
Oh, yes, you did.
And we sat down at Camden's Daughter, and you told me your vision, which I loved. Loved your energy and stuff, but loved the vision. I do remember you distinctly saying to me, "I want to be the Budweiser of beer." I mean, obviously that was a little bit later in the journey, but I just liked that you had a vision, and you were very, as you are doing right now, you're so clear about what you want to achieve. And for me, as the right hand person, if you will, that makes my job a lot easier, because then my job is, how do I make that happen, not trying to sort out the deck of cards as to facilitating that direction, right? So I did that, left after a few years. I ended up, after a few small things, at Northern Monk, where I spent just over 4 years. And then about 2 years ago, I started my own business called Path. So right now I advise breweries and non-breweries. I work with Chris, Laura, Miles at Caravan as well. And advisory stuff is kind of across the board. One of the things with advisory that I believe is like you have to absolutely tailor these things to the people and the situations people are in. Advice isn't like you can't just like, it's not a blanket thing for every single person. You have to fit around a business to understand where you're going to push and pull, because there's already a lot of cooks in that kitchen. My view at things, what I always kind of guarantee people is, look, like a couple of months with me, and you'll already start seeing it. But my guarantee to you is like, you've got a vision of where you want to be. I'll help form that if you need it, but I'm going to help you get there.
Execute
Having me
it.
will make you better getting there. It's good. I work with Caravan. I work with Two Flints. I work with Garage in Barcelona, Vault City up in Scotland, and a few other ones. So it's been great, and yeah, enjoying it.
I think one thing that resonated with me when you came to us, and because there's actually other people, not dissimilar, but because I really enjoyed it. I didn't get the pleasure of working with other people from AB, but I think the one thing that you haven't leaned on is that you're a GMT, right?
Yeah.
And GMT within ABI is these kind of, without having to dive deep, it's like a Jedi Knight of kind of what they do. These, to become a GMT or to even be taken into the program is a very difficult situation. You interviewed, narrowed down from thousands. I don't know exact numbers, and then they have this group of candidates every year who are literally put in the hothouse around the world, thrown into market, thrown into breweries, thrown into the deep end, and sink or swim. But they're basically, the expectation is this is the new group of people who are going to come through. So there's as in you're going to come through and lead the business ultimately in the long run.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing quite a lot here.
Of course.
And I think that's why you were very good. And that's they'd found a very good person, but your fit for you wasn't right for them. But the fit for us was perfect, right? It really, really worked because you had those broad skills of you as a person, but also you'd been into their business and learnt a lot of a lot of different areas, from marketing, sales, operations, logistics. So you are multifaceted, but with one of the biggest and best brewing companies in the world.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, well,
but we aren't here to talk about me, but I did feel like I had to give a bit of context. So
it's easy.
I will move on. So the next thing in that, I guess, in terms of decisions to dig into and analyze a little bit further, is one that obviously is something that everyone knows. I think the first three was stuff that was more not so much the narrative, not talked about as much, but this one is obviously well known, which is the acquisition itself, right? So 2015, I think it closed at the beginning of January 2016, but it was 2015 was happening. And so as much as you can, I'm going to start pretty broadly here, as much as you can you kind of walk through from we're Camden doing our thing to all of a sudden there's this talk of an acquisition to it happening? What happened? What did that look like? What was that story?
Oh, it feels like it was just yesterday, but it's a long time ago, right? It's nearly 10 years. Yeah. And fortunately we weren't for sale, so I guess that's so that we weren't focusing on anything like that. We were just focusing on being good and being bigger, and we were working, we were growing at high double digits, if not triple digits, year on year, right? So we were breaking into the 100,000 hectoliter mark, which was just outrageous. When we started, I remember setting up Camden. It's like, well, if we can have 100 accounts and they do 3 kegs a week, well, we'll break even. Because remember, the reason we'd done this in the first place is we built this brewery, and everyone was spending £50,000 on an open fermenter brewery, and we went out and spent. I did about £2 million on a brewery that was focused on making lager, to make sure that we could make it just as good as anyone else and better. So that if we went to a bar and they said, well, you can't do that, we go, well, yeah, this is that we can. And I think, so I guess I was going sort of backwards to go forwards, but we were doing our thing, and it was a shock. But and it felt right. It was like, well, we won't, and then we but it was very soon that I knew in my mind, if I looked at other brands that I really liked, ultimately their way of future sustainability was going under the umbrella of it, because through that era, the 2015s, from 2010 to 2020, the acquisitions in consumer that's where you went. That's where you ended up. You ended inside a house of another load of brands, and I looked at it, I was like, I never went and asked these people if they liked it, if it was, but I'd seen, again, Tyrrell's had happened, Innocent had happened, to name 2, right? But there was lots of acquisitions, and I said, well, that's just the journey. You make it to a size, they really enjoy what you're doing, you come together and you work together, and that's where you are. And that's what we did. We joined them, and it was great. And I enjoyed it. There was obviously times, like any business, that weren't fabulous, but there were so many times which were just incredible. We sponsored Arsenal football, which would never probably may have happened by now because the size and scale we were at. But those things so a lot of things that I kind of dreamt of got fast tracked quite quickly, and were done really, really well.
I want to dig in that just a little bit. So you mentioned there that there's brands that went through this and you never asked them about whether they liked it or not, and then obviously in that process, obviously you have a vision going into that as to, what this will bring, what you want this to bring. But then at the same time, when you're talking to an InBev or whoever else at the time, they will obviously tell you this is what we'd like to do. And there's a bit of an expectation of this is what the future will look like. In the end, did it meet what you thought it would?
I think if I look at it from the outside, does the brand exist? Yes. Is it in good health? Pretty much. It's a bit different to when I left it, but it's still they haven't made a mess of it. I think they've done a nice job of it. I couldn't be critical of it because I think I really enjoyed working with people from AB. And I think a lot of the people who were in the business at the time really enjoyed working with people from the AB. It was difficult and different because, slowly as we came together, we got more and more. As we got bigger, we became more of an influence on their P&L. So they had to take more and more control, and the more and more control they took, which was right for them, wasn't so great for us. But that's ultimately I didn't see that in the crystal ball, and now with hindsight, I probably should have known that was what ultimately would have happened. Is there a perfect world? No, but is there a better world? Probably. Is it bad? I don't believe so. So my son said to me the other day, would you do it? I was like, yeah, I'd do it again. Of course I would, because it was really good. We got to fast track some things that would have, we got to survive. We got to fast track. We got to do some exciting things. We got to employ some incredible people. I got to work on some fantastic projects. Got to do a bit of public speaking. But yeah, I mean, could you fix the problems that were created? No, because I think that's business. I guess the biggest problem that I didn't see was if you're good at AB and there's lots of good people, you move, and so you build these incredible working relationships with these exciting people, and if they're good, they go.
They're gone.
and not gone down the road, like go to South America, never see them again, or go and work in New York. And so there's a friendship element of that, but there's also a commercial element of that. So you build a business plan, you build a 3YP, or you build the next year's strategy, and you've done it, you've got it signed off, and then you get a new sheriff in town, and you've got to sell the story again. So you spent a lot of time kind of pitching and working and making things, and it wasn't bad, but I just had to get used to it.
Yeah. It's a very good description of it. I guess the question that your son asked you, I'd taken on a little bit of a different lens. So like, my question would be, what would have the alternative looked like?
Gosh, without?
Yeah.
I mean, COVID. I mean, we were going after it, so I'd hate to think. I think we might not be as big, but I think when we really, I mean, I guess we were probably 150 to 200,000 hectoliters when we sort of really started to engine, and
Yeah.
So we probably, I mean, we might have come out of COVID a little bit scarred, but if there was no COVID and there was, because if you're going to wind back clocks, then we can get rid of all the problems.
Yeah.
If there was no COVID and there was no AB, then I'd like to think that we would have, that we'd be, that the business would have been growing at a steady pace, because I think we really wanted to get to somewhere and then really start to level it out and then grow at a comfortable pace year on year, rather than that accelerated growth plan that we were going through at the beginning. Because we couldn't keep it up. It was like having a final every day of the year, right?
No, I think one of the things that again, from an internal perspective that and I felt is that you go back to that interview I did with you at Camden's Daughter, and this idea of, we want to be the Budweiser, we want to be, we want to take on Peroni and stuff like that. And I think one of the things is a lot of times people think of the acquisition as the end game. And it's like, I know because I was with you every day. It's like, that was not the end game for you whatsoever. That was the means to actually achieve what you thought the business should do.
Yeah.
And that was the best way to do it. And I think that's why when you look back on saying those things about, the relationship and how it went afterwards, why you have such a pragmatic approach to it, because of course there's frustrations. There was times where there was battles about stuff. Absolutely. Tough days, but did they help you deliver that vision together? Did you get, were you able to do that? And I think that's probably where you have that level of comfort that was able to be the case. Personal.
I think, and I don't want to be I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but AB ultimately was like having a bank. It was like having a bank with us.
Yeah.
There was a lot more to them than that. Incredible. was technical support, loads of things, but the big thing that we really needed at that moment was to grow, and to grow we needed money. And I think that was, if we could continue building 1-year plans and 3-year plans that they were bought in on, which they were, because of, you know, the depth we went into on, you know, be that sales depth or marketing depth or people hiring, you know, the strategies were strong. They delivered. You know, we hit budgets, and I think so. It was the relationship was, you know, I guess, through those finite years, I guess those first 2, 3, 4 years was that, you know, it was about funding what we believed in. And then when we got to a level or a state, you know, size that really could function within them, then it ultimately made a lot of sense for them, you know, it was not hard like that, but for them to bring us in, right? And that's what they did. Yeah. Is there a beautiful world that I think it could be slightly better? Yes, I do. Of course I do, because I'm the founder and I can see different things, but it's hard because it's a big organization, and that's how they're built. So you can't begrudge it for that. That's what it did, right? Yeah. And I, like I said, we built an incredible brand with them, absolutely, under their guidance and under their watch and under their support, and built great friendships, you know. And it's still there today. You know, lots of brands have disappeared, you know, going into, you know, into big houses, but we managed to, and it's still growing. So that's, you know, it's a testament to what we set up with them and on our own, and it's testament to Camden today. Is there an opportunity for Hells to be bigger? I still think so.
Yeah. You ready?
Ready? Yeah. I mean, I do. I think there's nothing in the marketplace that satisfies the need of a local made lager. Yeah. You know, I still think that it's ours to, you know, I still think that there's a position there to be had.
I have no doubt you could do it too. I just don't know if you want
I couldn't even get here on time, so I'm not going to start.
Yeah, Jasper went to the wrong studio and had to hop on a lawn bike to get here. Yeah. But
improvised.
We
improvised well.
Here,
I think
you always deliver.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to do a little bit different is play a bit of a game or scenario piece here with you, because I think, you know, one of the things that working with you that I realized is your ability to have vision on things that maybe have high potential before consumers know that they have high potential, right? A lot of people can react to consumers, but understanding what consumers want before they know they want it is something that you definitely have in spades. So you took lager at a time when, you know, at the end of the day, it was not a very loved product, very, very drank product. I wouldn't call it a very loved product. Yeah. And there's another beer style that I think has some similarities, which is cask beer.
Oh, yes.
It's gone through some ups and some downs, some loves and some not loves. I think overall over the last little while has been mostly unloved. It's getting a bit of a renaissance now, but like I wanted to see what would Jasper do about cask beer. So I'm just going to throw it out broadly like that to start off, which is like, how would you go about making cask beer loved again?
I'd deliver it direct. No, I would. Yeah. I really would. You know, I think it's all in the dray in cask, because it's a beautiful beer. Like, it's, you know, on a cask beer in good condition in a great pub is one of my favorite experiences, and that can be in England, can be in America. I mean, look, cask in Sierra Nevada's brew pubs is amazing, right? So I think, but it comes down to deliverance. You know, if it's not looked after, and I'm not saying it has to be put in some refrigerated container all the way to the door and manhandled, but it has to be managed. And I think it's a bit like fresh milk. You know, I look at cask like I have fresh milk delivered to my place. You know, I have milk delivered 3 times a week because there's a milk run, and it's great. It's really good. You know, and I think that's where cask, for me, it's like, how do you, one, it needs energy. You know, I think there's a whole branding thing that needs to be done to it, where it's tried to reincarnate itself by being fun and engaging, but it's a tradition. So you need to lean into its traditional elements of it. How can you make that for a modern world? I mean, look at Guinness. Guinness is flying at the moment because of, you know, the guys at Devonshire, and what have they did? They've changed the badges. They've talked about how they serve it. They've talked about how they cellar it. They're refrigerating it better, and they're serving it, and they're focused on the experience. Now, that's, I believe, all that cask needs, you know, across the country. So how do you roll that out? You know, I think it starts small across however many sites it is, and you get that inertia and you get that buy-in. But I do believe, I don't know how big it is, but there's definitely room for a fantastic cask brand, or a fantastic cask brewery, or a brewery with one product within that really does end to end, from brewery first, obviously, and great beer, to how it's sold, how it's stilled, how it's presented, how it pours in the glass. Because how many times do you go to a bar that gives you cask and they serve it completely different to the person down the road? Different shaped dimpled glasses, some with a sparkler, some without a sparkler, some flat, some not. So there's a whole element of managing that experience, and I think it can only grow. It grows, and that can be very big. But I think it has to be, you have to understand it. How can we make that over 20 sites? How can you do that over 50 sites? How can you do over 5,000 sites? Because, people like good beer, and it's a great beer.
And going back to that branding elements of, modernizing it, or however you said it there, like what are some thoughts that come to your mind immediately? I know your way around a good brand, so.
Yeah, I think there's 5 Point do a really lovely job of it. Their best bitter looks great. I think there's along those sorts of lines, clear, like Guinness do a fantastic job of branding Guinness, just real with strength and power. No, a bit like us, kept it simple, bold, simple, seriously, not serious, I think there's an element of that, of just like really refining it, so that because everyone's thought, I've got the badge, I just start sticking things on it. It used to be really simple, the badge for a cask beer. Now there's like, more stuff and more stuff and more stuff. And it's like, and there's an element of how do you pare it back and it still be good? Because I think you can go too far, right? And I don't think, so there's definitely, listen, if I could do it, I'd be doing it.
Now, to be fair, you have called me once or twice, like, Luca, cask. But hence why I brought it, because I know it's something that you're passionate about.
I'm passionate about it, definitely.
Yeah. On the sparkler, are you a sparkler or non-sparkler?
Oh, I'm a sparkler all day long.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know how. I mean, you've obviously been in the UK for a long time, but how Australians think about sparklers. There's this divide between the north. I only got really to know cask when I lived up north.
Yeah.
Good cask, and it was sparkler, right? So.
Yeah, it's a funny. Like the people in the north don't even realise that we don't have sparklers in the south. And I was talking to some. I've got some friends of mine up there as well, and I was talking to them about it on Tuesday, and like here you ask for a sparkler in the south, and like, what's a sparkler?
Yeah.
And then like I really want. A beer that presents perfect, with an element of foam on top of it so that you can smell it and it holds the carbonation in, and you get a beer here that's in good health, but then it's poured to you totally flat, and it's like, that's not, if you look at Guinness, they wrote commercials on how a beer should be poured, right? Yeah. And I think that's as deep as cask has to go. It has to go all the way back to that root of like, temperature, presentation, all those things, and really put it back in the mind of how it's done correctly.
I can't, I always say like I'm quite naive because I came into the UK in 2016 when I came over to Camden. So, like I don't have the background on cask or hospitality that you do, but like I don't understand why anyone would not use a cask. I don't know if there's a specific quality element. Some people like it this way. The beers are designed in a certain way, but like I just don't get it. Like you've got so much more visual storytelling happening, quality storytelling, all these things that you're talking about. Like I don't get it.
Well, why you wouldn't have a sparkler or I don't know. I don't either because I think people lose them. I think that is literally it's it. Because we had, at the Horseshoe, it always had, and Daughter always had sparklers on everything because it does. It presents the beer perfectly. It opens it up, oxidation, just like at the point of consumption. It makes it look presentable, delicious. Yeah, and if they haven't got it, they've got to really like slam it into the glass to get that kind of action into it, which is, I guess purists wouldn't like, but, beer presentation is really important, super important, right? You wouldn't expect it, you wouldn't accept a Guinness that was poured to the top without a head, would you? It's the only beer in the UK that's meant to be served with it.
It's almost like a seal of quality at that point, right?
But then everywhere else, oh my God, my beer's not full.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Interesting. Knowing what we know now, what should we in craft beer have done differently? Or forget craft beer, modern beer. What did we miss? What did we get wrong?
I think growth, if I reflect on my time, is probably the thing I got wrong. It was a product of it was like a product of a P&L. It was like, okay, well, if we do that and do that and do that, then this is where we're at the end of the year. I think it was never like, I never understood, until I moved away from it, how growth's really, really, really unique, and it's hard and difficult. And, I probably thought it was, we're just growing. We're always going to grow. How big are we going to grow next year? And I think it was, even though, we had 3PLs and 5 YPs and 1 year plans and all those things. So we kind of had a strategy of where we're going to go to. I don't think I respected growth as much as I should because it's bloody hard, right? And I think we were lucky. We lived in an era where we had opportunities because we did really good things to grow. And so I guess if I wound back the clock, I would have probably appreciated growth a bit better, a bit more. Yeah.
Last thing, rapid fire round. You ready for this?
Oh, hold on. I don't know if I got. Yeah, go for it.
So the only rule at play here, very loose rules. There's not many rules in this podcast.
Don't like rules.
Is that if you can answer with either one word or one sentence. So first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
First one, name a brewery that excites you today.
Sierra Nevada.
Okay. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
You were there when we went to the Asheville, the one near Asheville. Were you
No, I missed my flights. Yeah,
that's the story of life. Bit of a theme here. When we were over for CBC,
CBC that time when you won the award, I remember calling you
all. Best decision you ever made at Camden?
God. Calling it Hells.
Good one. I like it.
Yeah.
Last beer you drank?
Oh, you're not going to believe this. Tagansy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
From inspiration to recency.
Tagansy Hellas. Yeah.
One beer industry prediction that you think will happen within the next 10 years?
Cask will win.
Last one. One sentence you'd say to inspire others looking to blaze their own path.
Do it if you only want to make it better. Yeah, it's my mantra.
So make it better.
Yeah, exactly. There's no point turning up if you're just going to turn up. If you're going to do something, that's a few more words. But my mantra would be, do it if you're going to make it better.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Pleasure. Sorry, I was a little bit late.
No worries. We got it done. Big thanks to Jasper. I know you've never done a podcast before. I don't think you have. No. Okay. And I know you don't like public speaking, so I do appreciate that a lot. I hope everyone's found it super interesting, insightful, valuable. Last thing, special thanks to Sellar, who was the sponsor of the podcast. I've spoken to them about them before. I'm actually gonna be doing a bonus episode with them at some point in the season, which will be cool. Great. So you can learn a lot.
I like the red as well, by the way. Thank you.
Yes, and we put the red on for you. And other than that, we'll leave it there. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And the next episode will be with Evan from The Colonel.
Wonderful beers, wonderful person as well. That'll be exciting.
So get that one in a few weeks' time. Thanks everyone. Cheers.
Thank you.
Yeah.